Bilinguals of Reddit. What's your "they didn't know I spoke their language" story? A friend of mine was visiting my country for a few days from Italy. He was staying in a hostel dorm that happened to have a group of German tourists sharing it. He said anytime he was back in the dorm, he would hear them laughing and making fun of him in German. Little did they know he speaks fluent German. He stayed quiet for the few days he was there and remained perfectly pleasant, speaking English to them when they had conversations, but otherwise keeping to himself. On the last day, as he was leaving the dorm, he turned to the group to say goodbye and added, "I hope you all enjoy the rest of your trip," in German to them. He said the look on their faces was priceless when they realized he'd understood everything they'd been saying about him. Edit. Posted a comment on a small thread, went for a walk, come back to find it's blown up. Whoops! I realize this sounds like the most generic story ever, but I'm sure my friend isn't the only person this has ever happened to, and not really sure how I could prove it otherwise. Edit 2. Spoke to my friend about it since, and he said the stuff they said about him was that he must be the weirdest person on the planet because he was traveling alone, and that he must be queer because he chose to read his book instead of talk to them all night. Nice group of guys. Not me, but my stepmother. She grew up in Japan and speaks fluent Japanese. She looks Italian and white. She has an olive skin tone, and since she is only a quarter Japanese, she doesn't look like she is from any East Asan speaking country. One day, her and some friends went to get their nails, both hands and feet, done at a salon for some girl time. The ladies who were doing the work were speaking fluent Japanese and were mostly gossiping about men and other things until they got to the feet part of said procedure. My stepmother's friend is a little overweight, and she doesn't have runway model style of feet. Well, the ladies who work at the salon are just starting to make fun of her in Japanese, laughing and giggling, enjoying themselves in someone else's misfortune and looks. My stepmother said she let this go on for too long. It was about 5 minutes of them talking shit before my stepmother replied in Japanese. Her comment to them, "I didn't realize that we needed to look like princesses to get service here." Something along those lines. The ladies stopped and looked at my stepmother with extreme guilt. They apologized in English and were silent the remainder of the time my stepmother and her friends were there. I'm a Mexican who speaks Hebrew fluently. I was actually in the US in a deli around the time when the World Cup was going on in 2014. I was wearing a national team jersey and had been watching with family. We usually paint the colors of our flag on our cheeks. Tradition. The game was over and we were getting food. So my parents, brother, and I walk into a booth. We sit and the people behind us, 3 middle-aged women, start speaking in Hebrew saying, "Look at these stupid Mexicans," which should have been a giveaway since the word for Mexicans in Hebrew is Mexicanim. Being loud and thinking they own the place. Typical. Well, I turn around, look at them and answer in Hebrew. Yes, we are very proud of our country and the great job they are doing at the World Cup. If it bothers you, you can move. The look on their faces was priceless. I've never felt so empowered until Mexico did a shit job and got eliminated from the cup. Edit. On our cheeks. These stupid. Also, I know que no era penal, okay? I'm Swiss and Peruvian and live in Peru, so I don't look at all like a Swiss guy. There were 2 Swiss girls sitting behind me on a bus talking about Latino guys. Then one of them asked the other if she found me attractive. I turned around and said that I would love to know that too. The look of confusion and shame was priceless. Then we just all laughed. Now I've got 2 new friends. Edit. They were speaking Swiss German, Schweizerdeutsch. Edit 2. They both later confessed that they found me attractive. I have a reverse story. Deep in the night, I leave work. Small road on a small city in rural China, so no public lighting. I go by the side of the road until a taxi comes by. Finally find one, we spend the next 50 minutes speaking about all and nothing. Weather, road repairs, and so on. We arrive at my residence. The driver opened the front light to help count the cash. Blood-curdling scream. The driver start, "You're not Chinese." Me, "Not last time I checked." Nota, I am not the scary type. 75 kilos white nerd wearing pants and dress shirt. Was walking to class with my girlfriend when we ran into the janitor who also happened to work with my girlfriend at Home Depot. They greeted each other in Spanish, and then the janitor asked in Spanish, "Is he the same one or the other one?" She looked at me knowing I knew what she said and tried to laugh it off at it. Follow up. As that happened, we both walked into an elevator together because we were heading to Spanish class together. When we got in the elevator, I got pissed and questioned her. She seemed to be just as surprised as I was about the whole situation, and claimed she didn't know why she would say that. No, I didn't break up with her, and we've been dating for over a year now. I assume it's because a couple weeks prior we ran into the same janitor who had seen me with my girlfriend for the first and said something about, I was cute. Couple weeks later, with a beard and haircut, she probably forgot what I looked like, so I blamed it on that. Nevertheless, was wary about the whole thing, and she has even questioned why I never thought more. Gut feeling, I guess. Not me, but my friend's mom. She was visiting Japan with a friend. She, white, but speaks fluent Japanese. And her friend, Japanese descent, but only speaks English. Were on a train, and some yakuza approached the Japanese-looking friend and said something along the lines of, "Stop speaking English. You're in Japan. If you're in Japan, you speak Japanese. Your immigrant friend doesn't belong here." In Japanese, obandai. Well, my friend's mom has all the guts in the world and stood up and just started going off on the guy in fluent Japanese, and the guy is just standing there, flabbergasted. Wish I was there. Uplifting one. I'm white, and I was at a bar in Beijing dancing with a couple white friends when I overhear a girl telling her friends I'm cute and deciding whether to say hi to me. The thing about being white in Beijing is that you stand out in any bar you're in. Don't even have to be attractive. I know Chinese from study and exchange, so after like 10 minutes of on and off dancing near the group, I leaned in and said, "I think you're cute too," to the girl in Chinese. They all erupted like geese orgasming, and I got laid that night. I'm Asian, but grew up in Australia, so I've known English since the beginning of my life. Sometimes I'll be walking and people will either say something to me in the slow tone of voice or talk about me and not realize that I know English. Once I start talking, they will have a double take and revert to their normal speaking tone. Or they will shut up about me and walk away all embarrassed that I understood everything they said. The common thing is they will be surprised at my Aussie accent. Years ago, the placement of my bedroom was such that I could often hear my next-door neighbors chatting as they walked from their car to their front door. The volume seemed to indicate that they intended for me to hear but assumed, rightfully, that I couldn't understand their language. I couldn't even figure out what language they were speaking, let alone what they were saying. However, one night my partner, now husband, was over and he could identify the language because he spoke it. They were calling my roommates and me alcoholic whores. I sometimes volunteer in a local charity shop, and although I don't speak much Welsh, I understand a lot. So I know if people are dissing the special needs volunteers in Welsh, or assume that I have special needs. If they buy something, I respond in Welsh. That usually shuts them up. And because I have Swedish family and know the odd phrase, any Swedish tourists we get coming in are quite impressed that I can identify them as such and say thank you in their language. I'm half Chinese, quarter English, quarter Irish, and was born and raised in London. I don't look particularly British, or indeed Chinese, but I definitely look foreign. In the wake of Brexit, I happened to be on the phone to my mother, Chinese, while on the train commuting into work, so I was speaking Mandarin. While on the phone to her, I overheard some little prick grumbling about the fucking Chinese in this country. Brexit borders immigrants, Muslims, Polish builders taking our jobs, stealing our benefits, rada or whatever. But the word chink came into it a couple times too. Clearly this man had been emboldened by the vote to leave the EU and felt justified in airing his racism, feeling there were lots of like-minded others. English very much being my first language, I turned to him and just said, "You fucking what, mate?" in my clearly from South London accent. At this point, he immediately started to backpedal and said I was all right because I was one of us, whatever the fuck that meant. So I got called out for being a foreigner in my own country, which is both amusing and sad. I speak fluent German, and traveling is a nightmare. No matter where I think, bump into Germans complaining about shit and making really culturally condescending comments. I was in New York waiting to go up to the top of the Empire State Building, and there were a family of Germans complaining that the aircon was too high, that it cost too much to go up there, that the wait is too long, that they hope there won't be too many Asians taking photos. Like, nobody forced them to do anything. They could have left. I just don't get people like that. I was riding the metro in Montreal and my car was pretty quiet, except for a family presumably on vacation from the States. They were having a very loud conversation, in English, about how they were a bit lost. The wife was demanding that the husband ask someone on the train for help, but he was refusing because he only knew a couple French words and no one would understand him. Little did they know that probably a third of Montrealers are Anglophone or Allophone, and that most of the Francophones on the metro that day would have at least understood a simple request for directions. Finally, the husband walks over to someone on the car to ask for help. Before he can get 2 words out, the person who would have heard their entire previous conversation responded in perfect English. "The next stop is the one you want." The whole car snickered a little bit as the realization washed over the family that maybe people in Montreal speak a bit more English than they realized. I went on a class trip to France my senior year of high school. We learned about and enjoyed French art, history, and culture, of course. But being 17-year-old males, my friend Mitch and I were far more interested in the topless beaches we'd get to visit in Nice. So Mitch and I set ourselves up on the rocky beach one beautiful sunny day and awaited a parade of beautiful and topless French women. At first, we were a bit disappointed. Apparently, topless swimming was more popular with 80-year-old French women than we'd imagined. Eventually, a young couple set up a towel right next to us. As we listened into their conversion, we realized they're both Americans and they're arguing. She wanted to go topless. He didn't want her to. "I don't want a bunch of guys staring at your tits," he said. "But everyone here is French," she argued. "I probably stand out more by not being topless than I would without the bikini." Now, I was on this trip with other kids from French class, so Mitch and I both knew enough high school level French to get around. But that day, at that moment, we engaged in the most fluent and convincing French conversation of our young lives. No wide-eyed, horny American teens here. Just two sophisticated French guys enjoying the beach, uninterested in some amazingly hot American girl, and whether she took off her top. We were conjugating verbs like our lives depended on it. Eventually, the boyfriend got pissed and left, and his girlfriend went topless. Mitch and I continued to play it cool, but this really did seem like the greatest thing that had ever happened ever. We talked about cheese and going to the library and whatever else our limited French vocabulary allowed us to talk about. Later that night, we both thanked our French teacher for the opportunity. She probably would have been disappointed to know what opportunity we exactly meant, but we left it vague and everyone was happy. C'est la vie. I speak a beginner's amount of French from taking it in university. When I was in Paris with my boyfriend, we were sitting at a restaurant called La du Falafel. So good. Like many European restaurants, the tables are in a close quarters. My boyfriend and I are chatting away in English, and when our food arrived, we began taking pictures to send to his mom, because it is freaking delicious and the most beautiful plate I have ever laid eyes on. Two older French ladies sitting next to us started side-eyeing us as we did this. Though I couldn't fully understand them because only beginner French, they were laughing and clearly talking about us kids and our phones. Ils sont ridicules. While I don't know exactly what they were saying and wasn't offended at all, I still thought it would be funny if they thought I could understand. So at the next chance in our conversation, I said something in French to my boyfriend. I can't remember exactly what it was. Very simple stuff, but in the past tense, which is basically as far as my education took me, to take them aback. It worked. They stopped talking instantly and looked a little shocked. Jar was eating delicious falafel and two ladies were talking about us. Said my most advanced French words to him. And they stopped their talking. One language person here, but I've got a funny story. I worked with a group of Korean students when working on my degree. We worked in a catering kitchen. I used to listen to them talk all the time and would try and laugh when they laughed. They would notice and give me weird looks. One day they were building about 5,000 box lunches. I was working across from them on the hotline. One of them was placing bread, next was on protein, next was lettuce, tomato, and cheese. The guy who was placing the cheese ran out and went to go get more. He walked to the cheese cooler but couldn't find any cheddar. About a minute before he looked, I noticed a new hire grab the cheddar and return it to the meat cabinet. Now, they all spoke Korean at work, but when he went to the one in charge, I knew he was asking where the cheddar was. She walked him over to the cheese cabinet and also found that it was gone. In English, I say, "Miji, the cheddar is in the far cabinet next to the roast beef." Then I pretend that I'm not watching them. She walked to the meat cabinet, pulled out the cheese, and yelled to me, "Do you speak Korean?" "No," I say. "How did you know what he asked for?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Miji." After all of that, they would switch to English when I was in the kitchen. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories.